Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work podcast. Today, we are going to talk about books, a topic dear to my heart. We're not going to talk about the random books, but actually how writing books can help you position you as the authority in your space, help you stand out among all this AI craze, grow your business by writing books. I'm bringing in an expert who has been in that space for many, many years. Randy, please introduce yourself to the audience and we'll start a conversation with that.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. My name is Randy Peyser. My company is Author One Stop. And for close to 30 years, I've been helping people get book deals with traditional publishers. So, for example, Wiley, Penguin Random House, McGraw-Hill, HarperCollins, publishers in this league, and many others. And so my company, we edit books, we ghostwrite books, we do book coaching, whatever it takes to get the content right. And then I'm kind of like the pitch queen. I love to get people book deals. And I have a very unique positioning within the industry because I pitch both literary agents or publishers, depending on the project and where it's best suited. So, for example, when I see the potential for a six-figure deal, a potential bidding war, which has happened for some of my clients, then I will take those books to the agents who do them.
Interesting. And how did it all start for you? How did you end up in that industry?
So, I have a very funny story. I say I slept my way into the publishing industry. And what I mean by that was in the early 90s, I fell in love with a magazine publisher. And at that time, it was the new age before it became everything was mind, body, spirit. But it was
Mm.
a very large new age magazine out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I wound up becoming editor in chief of that magazine. The relationship didn't last, but my career in publishing had been launched. And then I became editor in chief of a national Mind Body Spirit magazine. And then I wrote my first book, which was called Crappy to Happy,
Crappy to.
Steps to Big Happiness Now, which
Mm.
ultimately Julia Roberts holds up and buys in the movie Eat, Pray, Love in a bookstore scene.
No way. Wow. I have
Yeah,
to look up that scene
yeah.
now. Oh, hello there.
So this is my cat Little Bit, who is occupying space
Nice.
on this podcast as well.
Of
The
course.
dog won't fit, the husky won't fit on the chair. What can I say? And so I started in the magazine world, wrote my first book, was looking for a publisher, was going to New York. And at that time, there was what I call the feeding frenzy in the United States for the publishing industry. It was called Book Expo America. And I wound up going there 18 years in a row because after I found a publisher for my book, I just very organically started helping other people. So everything I did was very organic. And, this Book Expo doesn't exist anymore. It went out with COVID. But
Oh,
fortunately, I have 20 to 30, actually closer now, 30 years of connections to publishers and top literary agents. So I can reach anybody I need to reach by email if I want to pitch anything.
that makes it a little bit easier. Don't have to travel
Yeah,
over pretty much 3,000 plus miles.
right. And so last year alone, I actually secured 16 book deals for people, mostly
Wow.
with publishers, a few with top literary agents. I mean, that's a lot. And that mix included 6 business books, 2 mind, body, spirit books, a self-help book, a memoir, a political book, a guidebook, 2 novels, and 2 whistleblower books. I mean, that's
A
you
lot
know,
of genres right there.
big range. One of the books that got published most recently is a book by Alina Tebul. She's out of the UK and it's called Feminine Intelligence. And I sold it to Wiley UK, but Wiley US also printed it. And what was really cool about this particular book is that we finished editing it in in November. I pitched it in November and it came out in March. I mean, Wiley bought it immediately. And that's very, very cool, to have such a short turnaround time
Oh,
from, editing to pitching to publication. That's almost unheard of. So that was a really wonderful thing that happened.
I can confirm that it's unheard of. I had one of our guests on the podcast is preparing for his book launch, and it's taken him forever to do the editing, to first of all to find a publisher and do the whole process. I mean, it's definitely a long process, at least for him. So I wish we had a
Yeah.
conversation earlier. Maybe I could connect you both. But who knows? He loves writing books. Maybe he'll come up with another idea for another book, and I'll be able to connect you with him as well. He's out of Canada, but he
Yeah.
is all over United North America pretty much. So you've mentioned multiple genres: self-help books, spiritual books,
Yes.
political books, business books. Who are the people, the clients that come to you, and in is there a specific ideal client profile or profile of people that come to you and essentially ask for a service?
Yes, yes. And let me tell you who these people are. And I'm talking from a publisher's perspective, not from my perspective, because publishers make their buying decisions based on two main factors. Now,
Mm,
one is what you mentioned right at the beginning of the call about your positioning and the book's positioning. That's very, very important. What I tell people is you need own your lane. You need to bring something new to a conversation that's already happening. That's very strong positioning. So obviously, AI, such a big deal right now. Do you have an AI related book? Are you working in that field? Can you
mm,
share knowledge? Because people are hungry for AI knowledge now. But you have to own that lane. So for example, in order to pitch a project to, like, if I'm taking a project to Random House Portfolio, to HarperCollins Leadership, to Wiley, to HarperCollins Business, any of these publishers, you've got to own the lane. And what is required is a book proposal. And this is a business plan of 20 to 30 pages, which I'm proving the sale of your book in different categories. The
mm,
first category is called the overview. And if we can start this 4-page double spaced overview by saying the title of your book is the first book to, well, obviously you own a lane. So your positioning is critical. Now, that being said, publishers don't care about anyone's brand. So a lot of times people will, they'll come up with a title that includes their brand. Publishers don't care about that. They only care about selling books. And this happened with the first book I sold over 20 years ago. I sold it under the author's brand, but the publishers retitled the book to Nice Girls Do Get the Sale, a book by Eleanor Stutz. And I was thinking, girls, most of us, like, we're power women, are girls. But at the time, The Power of Nice had come out. It was really, really big. And Nice Girls Do Get the Sale wound up in Time magazine. The author's career just skyrocketed to the point where she's on stage at Moscone Center, at a conference. She's on stage with Susie Orman. She's flown to Paris. I mean, the doors just opened for her because the
wow.
publishers understood from their marketing perspective what was really selling. So that's critical. So half of a publisher's buying decision is based on content. Now, the other half, which a lot of people neglect, or they're just not there yet, it doesn't mean you can't get there, but it has to do entirely with the business side of publishing, not with your content. So books go through committees. Decisions typically are not made by one person, they're made from committee to committee. So the first committee would be acquisitions editors. An acquisitions editor has to fall in love with your book, bring it to their team, and they're considering X number of books, but they only have room for Y number of books. And
Mm,
so they have to see which one of these do they think, from their perspective, are going to sell the best. And then the book goes to the committee that I call the bean counters. And the bean counters are going to count your beans, and your beans are composed of your engagement with your audience, the size of your following. If you're a business book, you better be really, really strong on LinkedIn. And if you have a strong newsletter, that's great. I was sitting, this was just pre COVID. I had 25 meetings in New York in 2.5 days. 22 meetings with publishers, 3 with top literary agents, and I was pitching 16 projects. This is me. That's my playground. It's my fun. It's what I do. And I'm sitting across the table from Angelina Jolie's literary agent. We're sitting at a Starbucks table at the Javits Center, and I'm pitching a project. And I see the guy picking up his phone and starts typing. And I'm busy judging him. I'm thinking, God, that's rude. But it turns out he was looking up my author on YouTube and said,
no way.
engagement's too small. Who else do you have?
Wow.
So I want to tell you where your numbers need to be to get a publisher, or they need to be close to, because all the publishers, they're counting these beans. all of your social media numbers, they really, really matter. So Wiley, I can tell you, Wiley, Penguin Random House Portfolio, HarperCollins Business, HarperCollins Leadership, they want to see 100,000 people in your network. If you've got a business book, build that LinkedIn like crazy or work with a LinkedIn specialist who can help you get there and have a strong newsletter, show engagement. One publisher told me they go to a website, and you can look yourself up on this website called SocialBlade,
I know that.
socialblade.com, because apparently it shows the amount of engagement the author has with their audience. If publishers are going there, go there, look yourself up and build your platform. A lot of people can build quicker platforms on Instagram. And I think that's one of the reasons that those numbers have risen, because if somebody had 10,000 people on LinkedIn and you had a business book, I could sell it. Now they're looking for those much higher numbers. So I'm talking about more like the big five. A mid-range publisher wants to sell 3,500 to 5,000 books in their first year. All of those larger publishers, Simon & Schuster, whatever, they want to sell 10,000 books in the first year. We have to be able to prove that number, that potential in your book proposal. There's a section called About Promotions. We have to show all of your social media links, your newsletter, everything, and your real numbers.
Incredible. I have so many questions now, so I need to organize my brain real quick. But first of all, a comment on what you just said with that story from Starbucks and the gentleman looking at his phone.
Yeah.
Initially, or before the conversation, I was the impression that you write a book to gain followers, to grow your audience. But you say that it's actually the other way around. You need to have an audience, you need to have a following.
Yes.
Then the book can actually put almost like that oil or fuel on that fire that will essentially help you grow further. I had I had a friend in Germany, where I grew up, and essentially know him from school, and he got, right after I left, he got into publishing books business, however, mostly for business owners. And that was the engine that they used for it was Amazon Books. It was very new in Germany back then. So once you figure out how to get on Amazon, you could get that organic access to those customers, thousands or hundreds, actually millions of customers that Amazon would give, and that helped them, those business owners, grow. But obviously, we're not talking about publishers and the scale of projects that you work on. But that changed my perspective. That confirms what my thesis, that it's so important to be online, to build that digital footprint in some shape or form, because that can help you even when it comes to publishing books and getting a book to publish, because it seems like it's not an easy process to get the book published by the right publisher as well.
Well, that's true. Let's just talk about Amazon just for a second, because a lot of people will self-publish a book and then never market it. Just like, oh yeah, I just went out there to test the waters, whatever. But then they want to take that book or another book to a traditional publisher, and I say, good luck with that, because here's the problem. The problem is that you have a track record of sales. And so I was on a Zoom call one time, and I'm pitching an acquisitions editor, and she had a side big desktop computer. And so I'm watching her, and she looked up my author who I'm pitching because they had a previous book. She goes, sales are way too low. She had their sales numbers within 3 seconds, because publishers have that software where they can look up your sales numbers within seconds. They said sales numbers were too low on that first book. And so we have to be able to, let's say you have a first book out and those sales numbers are low. We have to be able to prove in that book proposal that you're really, really prepared and ready to reach a much larger audience with your next book.
That makes sense. And actually, it's a really valid point. There is an add-on to Chrome extension that lets you look up sales on any product, not only books, but any product on Amazon, the title of a book. Have you heard about the process that Tim Ferriss used for his very now popular book, The 4-Hour Workweek, the utopia of entrepreneurship, to work 4 hours a week? Have you heard about the process he did?
I haven't heard about his process, but I can certainly speak to titling books. But if you want to share Tim's process, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick one, because I'll be curious to hear your take on it, how you approach it, and that's maybe good reference here. So when he was looking for the title for the book, this is the time where, I believe now, maybe even 20 years ago, where Google AdWords started to, launch. I think they didn't start. It was beginning of Google AdWords, running ads on Google, search, pay-per-click search. So what he did, he would type the bunch of into the search engine, bunch of titles, potential titles for his books, titles that he thought might work. And he spent, I think he said, I don't want to lie, but $60,000 within a couple of weeks, maybe months, to find out which title got the most amounts of clicks. Once they click it, he didn't really care what happens next, even if he loses those people. He just wanted to find out the perfect title for the book. And apparently, the 4-Hour Work Week was a perfect title. And once he launched the book, obviously it became a top seller. So that's his story. And to add to it, David Ogilvy, I have his books all around the office here. He would say that 80% of the job on any copy you work, or not books, but any copy you work on, is the headline. So the headline could be the title of the book. So what's your take on the titles?
Okay.
Let's start
So
there.
multiple publishers have used this exact phrase, including the McGraw-Hill acquisitions editor and another publisher I was pitching to one time. And they both said, we're looking for outcome-driven titles. And
Hmm.
so the promise of the book is in the title. And the McGraw-Hill acquisitions editor defined it. She said, I'm looking for books that'll take a reader from point A to point Z with all the steps in between. So by the time the person finishes reading the book, they can actually apply something and do something differently. So outcome driven. Now, publishers, that being said, they're also looking at keywords. And so, I had a book, a wonderful book. Richard Wildman wrote a book, and I helped him title it The Loyalty Grab. We thought that's a really hot title. But the publisher doing their keyword search, no, that's not going to work for them. The book became 100 proven ways to acquire and keep clients for life. Said exactly what the book is. And Richard, he's a prolific speaker, but he sold something like 6,000 books in the first 3 months. That was like this outrageous amount of books. So, speaking to Tim's book, people like fast, short. What can they accomplish in a week, in 5 minutes? 5 minutes to, like I had a book years ago, Grab and Go Stress Relief. Publisher retitled it 5 Minutes to Stress Relief. 7 days to social media success, whatever. They just want fast, whatever. I had a book, it was 30 days to social media success. And the publisher said, what can you do in 7 days? Just like, so fast, get it done, all that kind of stuff. That counts. Publishers love that.
That I can imagine that the titles you mentioned already start playing with my cognitive biases and start going, wow, 7 days. That sounds great. Or 5 minutes stress
Yeah.
relief. That sounds amazing. I have a bunch of books upstairs in my home library that some of them have those titles. And here's my next question. A lot of those books actually don't take me from A to Z. They take me from A to maybe B and then make me read plenty of chapters that are so irrelevant and just don't make any impact on me. So how do you make sure when you work with an author that the books is actually taking the reader from A to Z and the content is valid
Right.
and it can work?
Yeah. Well, I would never pitch anything unless the book was stellar and ready to go. And how that determination is made has to do with the editorial process. So, for example, if somebody brings a book to me, so they've written their draft of it and made it as pretty and special as they can, then the first step is a read through and analysis, which is very in depth and it's going page by page and just not only is this, a great read that's going to help someone, but are there any red flags from a publisher's perspective? And how do we know that? So I have a team that works for me, highly vetted. So for example, one of my editors is a former publisher from Simon and Schuster. Everyone is highly, highly vetted. They had to have come from traditional publishing or have edited or ghostwritten many books that have sold to traditional publishers. So we have a very, very strong idea as to what publishers buy. So
That
that's just critical.
and I like the keyword here, looking at or reading the transcript or the first draft of the book from the publisher's perspective, because that's something that
Exactly.
people can't do otherwise unless they have
Yes.
experts like you have
Yes.
on your team that will help you look from a, from a publisher and editor's perspective, because you might like your copy, you might you might enjoy writing it, but if it's not going to work for someone else and if it's not written in the proper way, then it's not going to sell as well. I'll be curious to hear if you ever pay or run it through the. Have you heard about the Hemingway app or the
I have
Hemingway?
not heard, no, because we're not using apps or AI to do any of our editing.
I
So
see.
I'm not familiar with it.
it comes from Rudolf Flesch, and I have his original books from the 40s or 50s, maybe even earlier than that. He wrote a bunch of books on how to write simply, or how to write simple copy, a bunch of titles that essentially talk about readability levels. And Hemingway.app it's essentially a platform that digitalized his process. When you open his book, he has a ruler. He gives you a bunch of formats, or formulas, better said, formulas that he count the words in the sentence and, for example, divided by the length of the sentence and lines in a paragraph. And that gives you a very complicated process. Now, obviously, the app makes it simple. You just have to paste the text, but it gives you the readability level. The goal is to keep it below grade 8. That way, everyone can understand what it said. So I'll be curious. I guess you already answered the question that you don't really pay attention to the readability level from that technical perspective.
No, well, I say there are two types of brains of people writing books. This is what I've seen. And so there are linear people, and linear people are going to map out the book. And that's kind of like what you're talking about. And they're going to have their roadmap. These are my chapter outlines. I'm going to fill in the blanks of my chapter outlines. And then, yeah, of course, we're always checking for readability, but we're not using an app to do it.
Yes.
So that's one type of brain, linear people. Other people are what I call process oriented. And process oriented people, I'm a process oriented brain myself. So we're just going to write about this and write about that and write about something else and write about this and eventually put it all together and see what goes in the book. And so, I call it chunks of gold. So these thoughts are coming out of my head. Just write it down, write it down, write it down. One thought doesn't have to relate to the next, but I'm writing them all down and then seeing what sequence do these go in, what stays in, what goes away. And it's actually my process for writing all the books that I write.
And question on that, I'll be curious to find out. So when someone comes to you, what stage of writing a book are they at? Do you help them with the process to find those golden chunks to essentially start writing about them, or do they have already a pretty much written first draft of the book and you help them with the next steps, which is editing, etc.?
So people could be anywhere in the process. So, for example, when we do book coaching involves a series of Zoom calls and learning about your topic, helping people create the roadmap, and then the author will have the roadmap. So they're writing chapter by chapter and getting feedback right at the end of chapter one, and then here's feedback, revise, here's feedback, revise. Let's go to chapter two. So we guide entirely the entire process and then edit and polish the book at the end. So that's one way. Or people can come, as you mentioned, or as we talked about, we analyze, the book goes back to the author to input changes, and then we can edit it. Or we'll just ghostwrite it from scratch and just, have conversations with people and send chapter by chapter. Did we get your voice right? Did we capture your message correctly? Then we revise, then get it to you. Okay, great. Okay, then we move on. So a number of books we've done, ghostwritten, I've gotten 6-figure deals, and that's very exciting. I have one book right now that we've ghostwritten, and 2 publishers have offered contracts on it, and I love that.
I can sense the fulfillment from it
Yeah,
as well. Randy, have you watched the book launch webinar by a recent one by Alex Hermosi?
I haven't.
Are you aware that he broke the record for selling books digital and in print? I believe actually might be in print. The world record, the Guinness record, might be actually a printed book within 24 or 48 hours.
That's exciting. I think that's great. I tell people my lane is to help people get their content done and right, done correctly, and get the book sold to a publisher. So I'm
Mm.
not really involved in the promotional aspects. I have many promotional partners who do all different kinds of things, like from getting books into 5-star luxury hotels to getting book reviews. They all specialize in gamifying books or whatever. They all specialize in whatever it is they do. But my
I see.
lane is, let me get you a book deal.
I see. It's that the marketing aspect of the book, it's not something that you really are working on with the
No. I mean,
after.
I like to help authors because I have over 26,700 something people on LinkedIn. So if a book's appropriate for LinkedIn, I like to just post for people to help them. but that's just something personally I do. I don't charge for it. It's not what I do, the
Yes,
promotional things. So that's the one way I do help.
it's a great gesture. And it was just
Yeah.
fascinating to observe that he was able to accomplish it. Obviously, content or something you've mentioned earlier, having that following helped tremendously, obviously. And he started promoting it before he finished writing the book itself. So it was just quite interesting to see how it worked. And just to give you a summary, so you don't have to watch the 5-hour webinar that was hosted live, he pretty much started selling books in 200 books instead of one book. So you could have essentially, if you purchased 200 books at once, you could give them away as a form of foundation or a donation, not foundation, donation. And that has helped him reach, because of his following, his reputation, his space, sell 2 million something books within 24 or 48 hours. So just interesting. And I think it was very, very unique to see something like this happen in real life.
Let's talk about the donation model because there are sponsorships for books. And it's actually what I'm doing right now with a book I'm writing. I am
Hmm.
writing a book called Bald Courage, BALD, Bald Courage, to help chemo patients just get through each day. Just turn to any page in this book and you'll find one nugget that will help you get through the day. Because I went through breast cancer, chemo, and radiation in 2012. Chemo was tough. And this is the book that I wish I had that would have helped me. So,
Hmm.
just turn to any page, you'll find some bit of wisdom that'll help you get through the day. And so I want this book gifted. I want it gifted to chemo patients. So how do you do that? And so I thought about who might sponsor this book. And I actually have a nonprofit sponsor that the book will be under their auspices that I just was introduced to, so that companies or individuals can donate towards it, and have their tax deduction. And meanwhile, the book can then be gifted.
Hmm.
And I'm just really excited about it. It's a project I have in the works. I know 3 people who teach the sponsorship model and all have done extremely well for people. And so I'm just, happy to point people in the right direction if you think you could work for sponsorship.
May you break the world Guinness record from
I
Alex
love it.
from last month.
I love it. I love it.
I'll, I'll do my best to promote it as well when the time comes. So let me know. I'll be happy to
Thank you.
help with the promotion and spreading good work. There is a lot of awareness in where we live in the Coachella Valley around that as well. So I'm sure there will be some people locally. I already have a few people in mind, including my neighbor who's going through that as well, and I'll be happy to promote as much as we can here. Randy, speaking of that, what gives you? You've been in the industry for many years. What gives you the most fulfillment in the entire process and working with your clients and doing what you do?
I love getting people book deals. I write the book proposals. I've written the proposals that have gotten the 6-figure deals and bidding wars. I love polishing proposals if someone has one, and I love pitching. I love it. And I forward all correspondence to my authors so they're completely in the loop, anyone I'm pitching. And, my connections, they're all first name basis connections of people I've known who I have real relationships with, people who we give each other likes for our warm fuzzy dog pictures on Facebooks. They're real relationships that I have in place, and I just love it because of what can happen. So for example, my Crappy to Happy book, the first book I write, winds up in the movie Eat, Pray, Love. You can't predict these things. One of my author's books wound up in 3,000 copies sold to FedEx office stores around the country. One of the most fun stories, the funnest, I don't even know if funnest is a word. I had a woman who was a bored housewife, and she and her bored housewife friends, that's what she called herself, a bored housewife, they got together and they formed a little group called the Chicks in Charge. And they decided they're going to take back the dreams they left behind. And
Mm.
so this woman, her name is MJ Margraf, her dream was to become a pilot, but she had to face 2 major obstacles. One was it's a very male dominated industry. 2, she had to learn how to fly a plane.
Yeah.
And the book is a really, really fun read. And she eventually becomes a pilot, but she doesn't stop there. She becomes a flight instructor, but she doesn't stop there. She creates a game with a group of high school students that was played on the International Space Station. bored housewife goes to a full page feature in Oprah magazine. You have no idea what can happen when your book comes out.
That's incredible. And yes, like you said, you couldn't predict it
Right.
at
And
all.
just
You have to just
seeing
do it.
those kinds of things, like multiple award winning books and, just Publishers Weekly reviews and Wall Street Journal bestsellers, I've seen all of this and it's just exciting and fun to see that I'm helping people make their impact in a very positive way.
Incredible. I know you don't use AI or nor your team to do the editing and
Right.
analysis of the books, but what do you hear, maybe not think, but hear about helping or use essentially using AI like ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity to help authors be discovered? Because now this becomes pretty much those LLM large language models become search engine just like Google is. So we talked about social media following, but I'll be curious to hear what you have been exploring so far as like AI, this helping authors be discovered, their books be discovered, and maybe the summaries of those books, something that would make the reader or someone who's typing, finding those books through ChatGPT to purchase those books as well.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to answer this kind of question because it's not my lane. It's just really not my lane because I don't use AI and publishers don't like AI. Although, obviously people are looking at search terms and things like that. Publishers are running manuscripts through, plagiarizing kinds of programs, just to make sure, just as they are in schools. And it's a huge issue right now in colleges. I was listening to an NPR broadcast just the other day talking about this, about students just turning to AI to write their papers. And, it's just a difficult subject, but it's really hard for me to address because it's just not my lane.
I see. No worries at all. I think it's just interesting, and I agree with you. There's two sides of it. There's a good side, and that's it, just like with everything else. But I think with the recently updates where you can purchase directly through AI to ChatGPT now on Etsy, Shopify, and then soon, most likely, on any other platform as well, that it might help the authors be discovered. But again, the writing aspect of it and having the content rewritten by too many people is definitely a risk that we all should be aware of. And I always remember when we talk about that, the study that they've done, that already when people overuse AI, especially for critical thinking, that their brain matter disappears and it's not going to come back
Interesting.
unless you start training it. And neuroplasticity is a real thing out there. So pay attention to this, and for the listeners, and make sure that you train your brain and from all angles as well. And I have a philosophical question for you, Randy, a little bit philosophical.
Okay.
Makes people think philosophically about it, about the answer when I ask it. So if you had an opportunity to sit across the table from Randy, who's just starting out, what advice would you have for her?
Well, that's a phenomenal question. I really, really love it. Two words: speak truth.
Speak truth.
Yeah, so I write nonfiction, like Crappy to Happy. These are experiences I went through, how I went from the poop emoji in my life to the smiley face and the sunshine. I mean, just speak truth and be a way shower. So, and what I mean by that is that people are often afraid of imposter syndrome and they're afraid to show who they really are at times. But if you're willing to step up and show who you really are, then you become a way shower
And wait,
for
sure.
others. You give permission to others to
I have to
shine.
write.
It's just a very powerful thing to be.
That's something that I'll have to definitely write on. I love that. I had to write it down. Be the way show and to speak truth. And you touch on
Yes.
the imposter syndrome, and I have this mammoth here on my desk that my 10-month, almost 11-month-old loves to play now, and hopefully she won't break it. But that is a reminder. I read an article last year or 2 years ago about the imposter syndrome, a very long article. And in the article, they mentioned mammoth many times, and for the reason that they don't no longer, unfortunately, they're no longer around. They don't live with us. We have those fears around ourselves, perception of ourselves, self-belief that sometimes stop us from being the way shower and speaking the truth because we're afraid, because we are sensitive to how people will react to what we're going to say. I put this on my desk since I publish a lot of content, and every time I hit publish or I post something, I get that uncomfortable feeling very often still that maybe I shouldn't post it. Maybe who's going to read it? Why should I post it? Maybe it's too much, or maybe it's a nonsense. And then I look at that mammoth and reminds me to just press that button, publish it. And if I like what I'm talking about and it's speaking the truth, my form of truth, I guess, then I'll definitely publish it. So I'm glad you mentioned that as well.
I'd really like to address fear.
Go ahead.
This is something I talk about many times when I'm speaking about how to get a publisher, because everyone, I don't care who the human being is on this planet, but everybody has their level of comfortability and a level where they hit a place of fear. So when I was in New York at my first Book Expo America event, and I'm looking for a publisher for Crappy to Happy, there's 40,000 people running around, and everybody wants to make their connections, and everybody's moving very, very quickly. And it's a type A environment, and it's very intimidating. It was a deer in the headlights kind of experience. Because again, this was years ago. This is like almost 30 years ago. And I'm with a very dear friend of mine, Jill Lublin, who is a national publicity strategist. And we're walking along, and she sees a name badge, and she goes, CNN! And she's like lunging after CNN. I'm like, CNN, and I'm following. And then she makes the connection, and we move along, and she goes, USA Today! And she's rushing up to USA Today, and I'm going, USA Today. And I realized I had what I call the hiccup of hesitation. And the hiccup of hesitation is when we're going for our dreams, no matter what they are, in any aspect of our lives, but we hit that little hiccup, that fear, that backstep, that I want this but, whatever that but is. And I realized I had this, and I wanted to overcome it. And I decided I am going to physically model my friend Jill Lublin on the show floor. So we're walking along, and all of a sudden I went, Ladies' Home Journal. And I went after that person, made the connection, got the business card, and moved on. And so what I tell people is wherever you hit these places of fear, what I say to myself, my own self-talk is, go, go.
I love it. I will remember that for sure.
Yes.
I'll use that very often. It reminds me on that book, was it 3 or 5 second rule? Was it Mel Robbins?
Might have been, I don't know.
Yeah, so essentially that's what she somewhat talked about in her book, that she was kind of depressed, laying in bed, didn't know what to do with her. And there's always that hiccup of fears you've mentioned. And she came up with this 3 or 5 second, doesn't matter. It can be 3 second rule where you just count to 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you go, just like you said it.
Yes.
That's and then you're
whatever the technique is, that's what you're talking about. It's forward motion. Go.
Forward motion, yes, and just do it despite the hiccup, fear,
Yes.
hiccup, and then you're going to hear stories like you had, where one author ended up going from one step to another and constantly rising up and to the right, being featured by Oprah's magazine and going where they wouldn't be thinking about going in the first place. So
right,
something when you take steps despite fear. I love that, and I'll remember that and use it, practice it very often. Final question for you, Randy, today. And I'd love to end on a positive note, optimistic note. What is something that you are looking forward to in the near future? Can be business related, doesn't have to be business related, but is there something that you in particular looking forward to?
Very much so. I'm looking forward to publishing Bald Courage, because I'm just finishing it now. I just got a phenomenal back cover quote from an oncologist saying that this little book should be in every infusion suite in the country. I mean, I'm just excited about helping people and getting the word out about it. So my next step is finish the cover design and then publish.
Can't wait to see that outcome as well. And again, we'll do our best to promote it wherever we can. So we'll make sure that we'll add it to the interview as well and promote it on LinkedIn and other platforms. Randy, it was an absolute pleasure and honor to meet you and host you. Thank you so much for all the wisdoms and practical advices that you shared with us today. I will definitely use a lot of it from today's conversation in life, business, and personal life. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. This was fun.
Thank you.